Welcome to Choose Views with Richard Chew. Get ready to dive into a world of insightful conversations and thought-provoking discussions.
As progressives, our job is to have an all-inclusive, full-on assault with all of our players.
A show that will focus on moving our political, social, economic, gender, and cultural conversation forward.
And all of our players means all of our players.
It's Choose Views. And now, here's your host, Richard Chew.
Good Thursday morning, progressives, and welcome to the January 2nd, 2025 edition of Choose Views. I got that right, Henry. I didn't say 2024. I got it right. 773-763-9278. Looking forward to your calls and looking forward to your texts to us this morning. Facebook Live, TuneIn Radio, YouTube, Twitter Stream, and iHeart Radio is where you can find us. Email me at richard@WCPT820.com. You can catch all of our shows there by subscribing to our WCPT podcast on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. There you can get the Choose Views short and long versions, as we say. Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, driving it home with Patty Vasquez. The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath, Out Chicago, and our other shows and interviews. And most definitely make your way over to the share spot. The good stuff to share, also known as heartlandsignal.com, our digital platform. So, guys, great to be with you this morning. And, yes, I got it right. January 2nd, 2025. I didn't say 2024. This is obviously my first live broadcast in the new year, and happy to be here with you guys, most definitely. We'll talk about New Year's stuff today, and we've got obviously items to cover that we normally cover and categories, I should say, and then things that have happened in the last 24 to 48 hours since we were on last. Hope you got a chance to check out the broadcast yesterday, which was our holiday best of broadcast, and I'm going to kind of walk you through a little bit of that later in the show. But we want to hear from you today, hear how your New Year's celebration was, what you did on New Year's evening, what you did on New Year's Day, anything interesting and fun and different. Love to hear of that. My wife and I just took it easy, which was kind of cool. Didn't make a big crazy stink about anything. We were home safely as the new year rang itself in, and that was kind of cool. So, I know lots of people are of that mindset. They're like, you know what? we're going to stay in this year. And then some folks get out and about. And if you're here in Chicago, I will tell you, because of course we saw this on television, didn't go, but it was pretty spectacular down on the river, Navy Pier, North Michigan Avenue. And what a wonderful celebration. I had a chance, I may have said this on Tuesday, but Monday I went to the Apple store, and I was getting some things done on my iPad, and I met this family, Henry, a father and his son and daughter, teenage son and daughter, who were from Sao Paulo, Brazil. And they've been, on vacation and stuff. And they were talking about some things that they had done. They got here the day after Christmas. But here's the thing, the short version of it. A great family. It was great seeing this family from another country here in Chicago enjoying themselves. And the father said to me that Chicago, of the places that they've traveled in the United States, that Chicago has turned out to be their favorite place. It's just the people getting around, the food. And we fortunately had we didn't have the snowy weather, but we had weather that allowed them to get out and about and do stuff. And so while we were sitting there talking, I told them, okay, so tomorrow night, meaning New Year's Eve, to make sure, because they were staying downtown, that they made their way to the river so they could see the spectacular show that we would have. And it turned out to be just that, from all the things that I saw that were posted on social media, and then, of course, were on the broadcast. So kudos to the city of Chicago for having the planning in place to do that. I know that the wind was a little bit up, and there was some concern about having fireworks during that kind of wind, gust of wind and all that, but we were able to put it together and pull it off. So thanks to the city of Chicago and the Mayor Johnson's administration, special events, and also to the businesses that are part of an event like that. It takes a collective of people to put together those types of events and do it successfully. And so as part of my conversation today, and of course we're going to talk a little bit about the events that took place this past couple of days. But as part of my conversation today, one of the things that I want to really just say loudly and proudly is that we here in Chicago, we get it done. I've said this so many times, and I will not apologize for being a fan of the city that I live in and love. We get it done. Imperfect as we all are, individually and in our groups and organizations and our families and all the rest, our city of Chicago gets it done. And what I want to ask of the people who live in the city of Chicago, and then in a broader sense, I talked about this the other day in terms of your number one thing you're going to pray, hope for, cross your fingers for, do a dance for, whatever in 2025. I have a few things, but I will say this. I want to, my request for those who are City of Chicago residents, City of Chicago and area folks, is to find a way to come together with someone or something or some entity that maybe you've been disconnected from. And then the New Year's celebration was an example in my mind of that. Big blue city. We know that this national election didn't turn out the way that we wanted it to, and the way that many people here in the city and the surrounding area and the region voted for, because this is a blue part of the country. Didn't turn out that way. And of course, there's folks here that voted red or voted for the 34 times convicted felon. I don't know why you did that, but I know why you did that. That being said, this is a big blue city, and we're going to remain big blue and strong. And so I want to put out to you guys that are here in the city and here in the area, kind of a clarion call to say, look, y'all, we have an opportunity here. We have an opportunity to get behind our political leaders, elected officials, and our business leaders who have their heads on the right way to continue to make our city do great things like we did for our New Year's celebration. We have that opportunity. And the way in which we thread that needle is by understanding that our long-term goal is to continue to have the city get the kinds of recognition from a magazine like Condé Nast that speaks to, in 8 consecutive years, the wonderfulness of the city of Chicago, which includes the region. I will say that in all fairness. But at its core, this is the city of Chicago. And to have an encounter like I did with this family from Sao Paulo, Brazil, that loved being here, we want that to continue to be who we are. And we want that to be sort of our representative badge. A great place to come, a great place to live. I see so many different posts, and I get so many notifications on social media that always keeps a big smile on my face, and tells me that there are people that are in our city that love our city. There are people that are in our region that love our region. And anybody can poke fun and say nasty things and say, well, but what about this? I could do that. I could sit down with the person for an hour and they could tell me all kinds of wonderful things about themselves. And I could poke, well, what about this? What about that? That are their, quote, imperfections? Because that's part of being human and then living in a community of communities where we have imperfections. But the job is not to continue to, as I say, what's our fix? How do we go forward? It's how do we pick up and say, what's going to make things better? So in Chicago, that's what my request of Chicagoans is how do we pick up and make things better? Okay. And if it means pushing Mayor Johnson and the administration here, then we do that. If it means pushing our county officials, if it means pushing city council and our county officials, and the regional officials, then that's what we do. If it means pushing our governor and lieutenant governor, then that's what we do. But we don't get to sit back and whine and complain. We get to look at the city and say, what do we do to make it better? That's our responsibility. Now, I'm going to broaden that and say this before we go to the first break. That's what progressive liberal Democrats have to do in each and every city and community in the country, is ask yourself, what is it that we can do, must do to make our city, our community better? Okay? Because this is what I promise you will happen. And I'm talking about wherever you are listening to this show in the country, whatever community you are in, your responsibility, your obligation to your community is to ask What is it that we can do to make our community better? And how can I lean into that to help make our community better? I know that, listen, there's something that you can do. It might be a small, relatively speaking, small thing, but incremental small becomes large with repeated action. My father used to say all the time, you drop water on a rock long enough, that water will dissolve that rock. Okay? Now, that takes vision, takes creativity, takes some persistence, and all the rest. And that's where we have to be as progressive liberal Democrats in the country. We have to be willing to look at our community and say, what is it that needs to be done? What can I do to affect that? Who do I need to talk to make those things happen, et cetera? Who do I partner with? The small businesses in the community to help make those things better. That's taking action, as I've said before. If you can take action, you don't have a problem. Now, if we take that mindset, if we have that mindset and that perspective as progressive liberal Democrats, this is what it's going to do. It's going to allow us to continue to galvanize and not be torn apart by the craziness on the right that's coming on a local level, regional, and national level. There's people that are right-thinking politicians and individuals in the city of Chicago that, unless they're willing to participate in making the city better, then I don't have any time for them. They're going to sit around and whine and moan and complain about the price of things. I have no time for them. And I hope that you guys can take a similar perspective when it comes to getting things done in your community, wherever you are in the country. If you're in Texas, Florida, Maine, California, Oregon, wherever of our 50 states, do not tolerate people not wanting to move things forward. Push them aside. They don't get to be part of your world, not a central part of your world, if they're not ready to take things, grab a hold of things and move things forward. That being said, this is that moment now that we are, into the new year that we have said we knew was coming. And now our opportunity is to take that moment and say to the right, whether it be a local right politician or person that you know, or business person that you know, or regional, national person that's elected or in whatever category of business, this is your time. This is your moment to say, you are not going to steal my joy and my belief that we can make the country that we want it to be. And I don't mean the quote unquote, make America great again philosophy. I'm talking about great country making itself even better. That's different than Make America Great Again. Because Make America Great Again has, as we all know, tones of racism, sexism, misogyny, and nationalism. And none of us who are thinking about moving the country forward should want to be a part of any of that. So, Chicago, L.A., New York, Boston, Dallas, Miami, Atlanta, D.C., Pittsburgh, just all the cities that can come to mind, little small town, wherever you are. This is that moment. This is that time where you say, I am not going to let these fools take us backwards, because that's what they really want to do. That's really what they want to do. They want to take us back to a time where only men, primarily white men, straight white men supposedly, Christian straight white men supposedly, ran everything. It's code. It's code, guys. So grab on. Let's get in this car, this bus, and move it on down the road. We got a hyped up bus. We got a bus with great suspension on it. We got a big, powerful engine, and we got a bunch of people that can help us move this thing forward. That's where we are. I hope you hear me. We're going to take a quick break because the number, of course, is 773-763-9278. This is Choose Views, and we will be right back.
It's Choose Views with Richard Chew on WCPT 820, where facts matter.
Hey guys, welcome back to Choose Views. It's January 2nd, and this is going to be a crazy, crazy year, but we're going to be ones that decide to take charge of what we do, what we believe in, what we fight for, and that's why I've said so many times we have to lock arms and keep this thing moving forward. Choose Views News for the first time this year, January 2nd, 2025. Yeah, unfortunately, starting off with the fact that 15 people have died in this New Orleans attack. And, of course, this is an awful situation. Dozens of others were injured in New Orleans after a man rammed a pickup truck into a crowd on the city's famed French Quarter early yesterday, New Year's Day. The driver, a Texas man identified by the FBI, was killed in a firefight with the police after the attack. His truck contained weapons, and 2 improvised exploding devices were found and disposed of, according to the agency. Solely responsible for this deadly attack. And what I will say to this, guys, is hold your opinions about this, and let the investigators do what they do to get us more information. And rather than pointing fingers at anybody, politically or socially or economically, send the good vibes to the families who were impacted by this. Because in addition to the people who died and that are injured, you just multiply that times 5, the number of other people that were impacted. The people who had to witness it, they were impacted. May not have been physically injured, but they had to see that carnage. So rather than pointing fingers, y'all, find a way to send whatever you can out to the universe, to send that strength to the people that need it. That's what you need to do. It ain't pointing fingers time. Trust me on that. It's not going to do any good. So please, Richard's little ask is to put that energy there. So, all right. Puerto Rico had a tough yesterday as well, but power has been restored to almost all of Puerto Rico after a day of massive blackout hit the island. At its peak, the outage, which began early Tuesday morning, left nearly 90% of its residents there in the dark. Luma Energy, which manages power for the island, said a problem with an underground line may be to blame, but it's still investigating that incident. So I'm glad that they've got their power back. AI, as we shift gears and talking about AI, is it going to have any transformational impact in the workplace? Innovations like hands-free computers, operations, and screen readers for the visually impaired could reshape how individuals with disabilities contribute to the workforce. And this is where inclusion has its place. This shift isn't just beneficial for impacted employees. It can lead to significantly higher productivity gains for businesses. Excluding people with disabilities from the workforce can cost up to 7% of the country's GDP. So that right there should be a reason to look into that partnering. AI CEO, check this out, adapt or fall behind. This was a pretty straightforward bit of commentary. How will artificial intelligence priorities change in 2025? Well, it's all about results, according to many companies who are looking and leaning in this direction. Companies that will focus on AI's real-world impact, from faster decision-making to enhanced productivity. For leaders seeking to level up their business in the new year, we are at a pivotal AI moment, and I agree with that. I think that we've got to lean into understanding AI better. And my question to you guys is, what practical AI use cases do you see coming this year? What ways do you think that companies will be leaning into the use of AI? Just curious. All right, meet the office influencer. This year in 2025, more companies could have influencers on the payroll. Employers are hiring full-time influencers to highlight company culture, brand authenticity, and reach new audiences. These new roles could help make company brands more relatable with day in the life vlogs and by tapping into social media trends. I'm curious about that as well. So do you think that companies are going to benefit from having office influencers as part of their business? It's interesting. It's one of those big ideas for 2025. Outdoor advertising looks to grow again. If you're looking for the next big thing in advertising, imagine a website banner ad, only much larger, three-dimensional and outdoors. Yes. The humble billboard is having a moment. Check this out. Even as digital ad spending has eaten into print, TV, and radio, the share of spending on outdoor ads has remained remarkably consistent. And even could even be poised for growth in this year of 2025. So we'll see what happens. This was one that I had to bring this to you guys because there's some impact of this potentially in other cities. New York congestion pricing is starting on January 5th. After delays and revisions, New York's congestion pricing will finally begin this coming Sunday, says the city's transit authority. Federal judge appeared to greenlight the plan, which levies a $9 fee on most vehicles entering Manhattan below 60th Street, if you're familiar with Manhattan. While the judge asked federal transportation regulators to review certain elements of the program, a lawyer from New Jersey, which is suing to block the fees, interpreted the ruling differently, arguing the plan shouldn't be implemented at all. Congestion pricing program is meant to alleviate traffic and raise funds for public transit. So here's where I kind of land with that. There are people who have said that in certain communities that should be implemented to reduce congestion and reduce some of the cost. And I'm not sure where I really land on it. I've heard people talk about, folks who live outside of a city like Chicago or other cities, that there being a commuter tax. And this is basically what that is in New York. That if you live outside of the city of Chicago or outside of Cook County, but you work in the city of Chicago or Cook County, that to facilitate the use of resources, that there should be an added tax to that. And now I'm talking about what people I'm talking about what I've heard people talk about, and in some cases, there's a case for a conversation. Curious about that. Not sure if it's something that would be workable here in Chicago, but New York City is definitely about to start this New York congestion pricing on Sunday the 5th. So I'd like to hear what you guys have to say about that as well, wherever you are in the country. And with that, it's always good for conversation. You never know, but it's always good for conversation. But there you go, guys. Some Choose Views news here on January 2nd, 2025. Want to hear from you this morning, 773-763-9278. You can send us a text message as well, and we'll bounce you back and maybe have something creative to say. Circling back to what I said before the first break about what different communities should be leaning into. The upside of leaning into finding out what you can do in your community is something that I say often, and that is it gives you something to do other than screaming and yelling at the television or at the radio or at your phone for some craziness that you saw on social media. It is about taking action. But before you take that action, you got to sit back and say, what is it that I see in my community that needs some energy put behind it. So it's kind of your own little, social, political business plan of how you're going to have impact and how we're going to go forward as a collective group of progressive liberal Democrats. Tomorrow we're going to have our good friend Karen Byrne with us from True Blue Politics, and you'll be surprised, maybe not, but I think you're going to like our conversation that she and I are going to have. As always, it's great to have her with us, and she may be in studio with us tomorrow. We'll confirm that. But either way, looking forward to that tomorrow. Guys, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, talk about, in terms of legislation or things that are changing, our neighboring state, Michigan, just came down with something that I think is pretty cool that we'll bring to you. 773-763-9278. This is Choose Views, and we'll be right back.
It's Choose Views with Richard Chew on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Hey guys, welcome back to Choose Views, 773-763-9278. So we're talking about what's happening in New York in terms of this congestion pricing, $9 fee, vehicles entering Manhattan below 60th Street. Okay, not sure if that's how that's going to work, but I know that there are other big cities that have been considering things like that in terms of a commuter-esque tax. And I think it's largely built off of the numbers of companies that have employees that commute from where they are, that may be in a suburban area or rural-esque area to a downtown community like Chicago. And so it's driven, it's driven a lot of people, no pun intended, to take public transportation rather than driving. That's what I see will very probably or possibly happen in Manhattan. And it speaks to something, when I was looking at this and kind of formulating some thoughts around it, it speaks to something that we in Chicago, and I go back to this family that was visiting here, and I hope they had a safe travel home from Brazil. They were very, very impressed with our public transportation, and they said one of the things they really enjoyed about being here is the ability to get around. So where does this go to? From a policy standpoint, as a country, as a city like New York or Chicago, L.A., Detroit, the list just goes on and on, smaller community. What it really speaks to, candidly, is we need better we need a hell of a lot better policy when it comes to our ability to get around, not just by gas-powered or even electric vehicles. We need better rail throughout the entire country. And, there was a movie there are two movies that came out back in the 90s, one of which Al Gore had his thumb on. One of them, I just drew a blank. Not The Inevitable Truth, but I'll have it in a second. It'll come to me because I didn't write it down. The other one was Who Killed the Electric Car. Okay. So my point of all this is, and not to go too far off into the weeds on that, I just want to use that as a kind of a signpost. We have to spend more of our time pushing our legislators in legislatures on a local level, regional, and national level to push for a better commuter support systems. I'm not trying to pretty it up, but just say it in a way that everybody can grab onto. Does that mean better rail? Absolutely. And it means it in a way that allows people who don't want to drive, that have to commute from in Chicago, a 40 mile away from Chicago suburb to downtown to Chicago to work, or north or south, and from northwestern Indiana. It creates, if we have more conversation around improving the legislation that supports the policies to have better rail, then we wouldn't have to worry so much about the commuter traffic that is caused from driving. Now, this is not something that's new, that you guys have never heard someone talk about before, or even in your own mind have said. Chicago is a pretty good city in that space. We have good rail service from, each direction that you come into downtown Chicago or into the city's metropolitan area. And other cities do too. We happen to be, high on the list in terms of the best. And that comes to people who come from other areas that say that, whether they be traveling from outside of the country here or they are from other communities that come to Chicago and say, I didn't realize how strong Chicago's or the region's rail and transportation services are. We need to still improve those, though. We need to have even better trains and better train systems in the Chicago metropolitan area. And we have put some money into that in recent years. But I think on a national level, what I'd like to see, and I know that President Biden and Vice President Harris were leaning in this direction as part of infrastructure, is improving, not just the roads that we drive on, okay, and our bridges and all the rest of that are part of that conversation with infrastructure. But I think we also need to make sure we're leaning a little bit more heavily into the conversation around national rail that's higher speed, that not replicates any other countries, because we have the technology and the brain power and all those things to do it and support it right here in the United States of America. So that's when I see this article and I think about Chicago, I think about how can we make this, how can we fix a different problem? How can we take that away? The need for a $9, for lack of better words, commuter fee. or they're calling it a congestion fee, and introduce legislation that turns into policy that we then can have that's going to eliminate having to do something like that. And part of it is increasing our national rail systems, our transportation systems. In this next administration, I unfortunately don't think that's going to be part of what they're even thinking about, candidly. Not even, the push is going to be more toward EV vehicles, which in terms of emissions helps the climate by reducing the amount of combustible engine vehicles that are out there. But the cost of the batteries and all of that's still going to be part of the conversation. Cost of the environment of the batteries and all that's going to be part of the conversation. But I'm saying let's fix another problem, which is just the sheer congestion that's caused, whether it's a combustible engine vehicle, hybrid, or an EV. So this is Richard Chu saying we can do a better job in that space by introducing legislation that turns into policy that allows us as a country to improve our way of transportation and getting around. I think that many people who have to commute by vehicle to their jobs are hoping for that, or would want to see that, where they didn't have to always be in the car and always have to drive to get from A to B to C. And it also links into something else that I've been thinking about for a long time. And that's, again, this is where Biden-Harris, listen, MAGA, y'all messed up. I'm sorry. The country messed up on this election, because the folks who are in rural communities, what you missed out on, that if you vote, assuming I'm making a little bit of an assumption, so give me a little bit of room here. If you are part of MAGA Republican-esque thinking right now, and you live in a rural community and you voted for what's coming your way and not coming your way, you can't complain. And this is going to be kind of my pivot. You can't complain about the stuff that this new administration is going to sort of push down on you. So, for example, just technology to be more connected to people if you live in a rural or even some suburban areas is probably not really going to be on the agenda of this next administration. And neither will the ability to have better transportation be on the list of things to lean into. President Biden and Vice President Harris, with regional and local leaders, were already heading in that direction. That's why he appointed, in part, or why Pete Buttigieg was in that role, because Pete understood it from a local standpoint, as having been the mayor of South Bend, Indiana. So y'all messed up. You just did. And I feel for you in some ways, because I know that your messing up was based on your bias. And you may not want to admit that in public, but you messed up on these things because that disconnection that is going to probably continue. I'm not speculating. I'm just looking at what they're saying to us, because their focus is going to be on other things, like the boogeyman known as the southern border. You missed out on the fact that these improvements that the Biden administration had already put in place and was going to only do more with either Biden or Harris as the next president. Those goodies aren't coming your way for sure now. So this is why I say, when we talk about where we need to grab on and what can our country do to improve, we have to look at it from the standpoint of how many things will we miss out on, because a large percentage of our communities voted for something that really wasn't negatively impacting them in the first place. And I'll cite you an example, just a very quick one that Henry and I talked about before we came on the air this morning, and then we'll go to this break. And I want to give a thumbs up to Michigan before we do that. But here's the thing, guys. Henry and I were talking about the numbers of things that he saw on New Year's Eve in terms of when he was out and about with some of his friends and his cohorts. And it came down to the very simple thing of the cost of stuff. And there were a couple places that, and I'm not putting Henry's business in the street specifically. I'm just talking about the general conversation around what people say they voted for versus what ultimately is going to be the outcome. The cost of things. Okay. So Henry was sharing with me, and I shared with him, the whole thing that, you go out and you see businesses are crowded and packed, and as they should be. But then you go out on New Year's and you got places that are charging, $50, $100 cover charges to get in, and people are just swiping their card and running in, and as they should. Don't get me wrong. I've said this before. I'm not saying that any of us shouldn't. I'm saying that if that's what you're actually doing, and if you're spending your money on, these different delivery places, the Grubhubs, and I shouldn't isolate a particular business, but if you're spending money in that space, and you're spending, $50, $60 on a couple of burgers, some fries, and some sides, learn how to cook. That's a week's worth of groceries and then some. And so this is where the country lost its way in this conversation about inflation. Yes, things are up. There are things that are more expensive. I don't want to hear from anybody that says, Richard, but you're missing the person that is No, I'm not. I'm not missing that at all. I'm saying to all of us, this is where this conversation around how people voted, they were afraid of some person that's an immigrant coming and taking their stuff, and saying that issue wasn't being handled properly by the Biden administration. Well, how many people actually do you know that happened to, where an immigrant came in and took your stuff? Okay, they're not eating the dogs and cats. It's the biggest lie of the year. From Haitian immigrants or Haitian citizens were not eating the dogs and cats. You got bamboozled. You got hoodwinked. And now you're not going to have the accessibility to things like better internet service, roads that could be even better than what the infrastructure bill is coordinating for, the jobs that come with that. My wife reminded me last week, not last week, I thought day before yesterday, wasn't the weekend, reminded me the jobs that come from the infrastructure bill in terms of the roads that are being repaired and bridges that are being replaced and improved. That's why the connective tissue here is something as simple as a $9 charge to reduce the amount of congestion in New York City doesn't have to be, if we vote for politicians who are going to lean into legislation that turns into policy that allows us to have leaders that are going to make sure that goods and services are available to our communities, and forcing the hands of businesses to do better when it comes to where the real inflation and the manufacturing that impacts inflation, and the distribution that impacts inflation, that allows politicians to navigate with the businesses to do a better job. I started off talking about the wonderful celebration was a coordination of efforts from the local administration to business leaders and all the rest. The same thing can apply to these other areas, but we have to elect the right people and not vote out of fear and then lie to ourselves and say that it's okay to go out and spend $50 or $100 on a cover charge to get into a place, and then be complaining and whining about the fact that, or in your world, that things are too expensive. Pick a hill to climb on. That's where I get frustrated about when I get frustrated about people saying that they voted for Trump because of inflation, or didn't vote for Harris because of inflation or because of the cost of this. It doesn't match up. It's not congruent. And I'm saying that as a broad statement with some specificity, because I know in some communities, the cost of goods is going to be high in Highland Park and in Hyde Park, or on the west side of Chicago, or in parts of Boston, or in parts of Philly, or in parts of Pittsburgh, and the list goes on. The fix to that isn't just reducing inflation. It's also getting businesses to coordinate better and forcing their hands to improve wages. Because if wages are up, then and we are able to control how businesses affect their cost, or create legislation that makes them think about it a little bit differently, then we've got a little bit better way of going forward. It's all interconnected. And I'll say this, and as I said earlier, I want to give a little bit of a shout out to our neighboring state of Michigan, because they did do what I just said is part of this conversation. And what is that? The minimum wage in Michigan increases to $10.56 an hour as of yesterday. How about that? They increased their minimum wage. But guess what? They've got leaders in the state of Michigan that happen to be progressive liberal Democrats. At the top of the ladder is Governor Gretchen Whitmer and her Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist. Then they've got legislators that understand the importance of pushing for that. And look what they did. Now, tie that together with driving down inflation, it's a winning ticket. So we're going to take a quick break, guys. 773-763-9278. This is Choose Views, and we will be right back.
Welcome back to Choose Views with Richard Chew on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Hey, guys, welcome back to Choose Views, 773-763-9278. So, yeah, Michigan is they're doing the work. They've got, and so what you don't know, and I'll share this with you, is Michigan has got a second raise coming. What does that mean? So they've got this first one, which is implemented now as of January 1st. And they have a second one coming in February. So starting February 21st, the minimum wage will be $12.48 for an hour for adults and $10.61 for minors. And tipped minimum wage will be $5.99 an hour. That is where you take the legislative body that's looking out for the community and say, all right, what can we do? What must we do to make things better for the communities that we serve? Because as much as I push and say and lean and talk about getting businesses to be honest about inflation, at the same time, we have to recognize that legislators have the ability to say, okay, if the businesses are not going to do X when it comes to where we know they've been gouging with prices, then let's make sure that we can raise the way in which people get paid. See, let me say this too. I heard, I was listening, to Rick Smith, who's on right before our show, talk about what used to be and how things used to be, et cetera, in terms of employment and cost of things and so forth and so on. And ultimately, the thing that has not happened in terms of all the giveaways that have been provided to people is that wages have not kept up with. Not just, people say wages keeping up with inflation, the cost of goods. No, wages keeping up with the cost of living is important, but why should they just have to keep up with the cost of living? They should exceed that. And Vice President Harris doesn't get credit enough for saying not just to survive, but to thrive. She didn't get enough credit for that during the campaign. She consistently said creating an environment, a community, a country for middle class and other parts of our society, of our country, that she would say, that not only survive, but they thrive. And keeping up with inflation isn't thriving, or wages keeping up with the cost of living isn't thriving. I'm sorry, that's surviving, it's not thriving. And so that the conversation, the concept around rising tide lifts all ships is so incredibly important in this consumer-driven economy that we live in. If we have better legislation that creates better policy that allows for employees to be paid more, then what that actually creates is more wealth for those who are wealthy, because people are going to spend more, save more, invest more. It's just simple math, y'all. And the frustration that a lot of people are about to experience is that nothing's going to change when it comes to one of the most basic things that we all have in common, and that's paying people more for the work that they do. That's not going to change in the Trump administration. It's not going to. 34 times CF is going to do everything he can to make sure that the people that he has around him speak to keeping wages stagnant. You mark my words. In a year from now, I'll have my own feet held to the fire. A year from now, let's see how much the increase in compensation for everyday folks has improved on a state level and blue and red states. I'm going to wait and see. But my instincts tell me that there's not going to be much change in the conversation around increased compensation. You're not going to see it. And if you don't believe me, look at the cabinet that he's suggesting and wanting to get in place. Look at their wealth. None of them are going to really be leaning into making sure that the people that work for their companies or organizations that they're tied to, they're going to really be supportive of seeing people get paid more. So MAGA, y'all got bamboozled. You just did. Trump supporters, y'all got bamboozled. And you gotta. This is something that I'll just say to you. You are directly responsible for everything that happens now. No more blaming Obama or Hillary or Biden or Harris, for that matter. This is all on you and in your lap, whether you be rural or in downtown whatever city. That if you voted for and if you're a Trump supporter, you got to support that horse, that dog, all the way through the race. If you want to jump off and I heard last week one of our callers said that, the people that are going to want to be part of the progressive movement or they voted. I think it was our good friend Cindy from Michigan that said this, that she knows they're good people, but they voted in a bad way. And that's true, but they're going to have to sit quietly in the corner of the room and let us run things, because y'all own this. You own the lack of innovation, the lack of progress, the lack of increase in wages. You all own this. And like I was saying, if you're a Trump supporter, attention, you are directly responsible for everything that happens now. No more blaming Obama. He's been out of office for, 12 years now? What's my math? This is, no, longer than that. He left office in 17. So not 12. Yeah. So you can't blame him anymore. You can't blame Hillary because she never became president. You can't blame Biden because all the good things that he's doing, you're going to suddenly say, if something doesn't go right, it's Biden's fault. Can't blame him. Particularly when you got a guy that says, I can fix everything. Just like last time, by the way. Didn't fix a damn thing. This is all on you. All the nasty, stupid, petty BS that Trump does belongs to you. You want me to read it again? Trump supporters, you are direct, and I'm talking about on a local level, even here in Chicago. Those of you who are upset about things that don't happen, that have ties to federal, and I'll give you an example. Holman came into Chicago area and spouted his garbage about Mayor Johnson and Governor Pritzker, the S word. The things that you start to see that are ugly because of their desire to deport people, that's on you. If you are late for a doctor's appointment because ICE has got roads blocked off to go and grab people to deport them. I talk literal because that's what's going to happen. You're going to be screaming and yelling about why is it you can't get to A, B, and C because of traffic, because of roads or whatever blocked off, and it happens to be ICE's, conducting a raid. That's on you because you voted for having these kinds of, crazy garbage people say what Tom Holman says he's going to do. So I'm putting it literal because that's how you have to sometimes see it and feel it. This is on you all. This belongs to you. Attention, Trump supporters. You are directly responsible for everything that happens now. If your roads aren't getting fixed, that's on you. If inflation doesn't go down and further than it already is, which is a Biden-Harris green box checked, if the cost of eggs doesn't go down, If those fees come back suddenly, the list goes on. That's on you, Trump and MAGA supporters. Any more blaming President Obama, Hillary Clinton, or President Biden doesn't work any longer. All the nasty, stupid, petty BS that's going to happen during Trump's era, that belongs to you. You have to take ownership of that. And I tie this all to one simple thing. We tried to warn you. We tried to make it clear to you. You can try to blame all you want to. And even some of the Democrats who are running around saying the Dems should have done X, Y, and Z. Okay, whatever. After action report could validate some of those things. But ultimately, there are people who said, I don't really care about infrastructure. I don't really care about these items over here. And I'm going to vote this way because I don't want to see other folks get opportunities and be able to move forward in this country. And that's what happened. So there you go, guys. When we come back, we got some more information for you on this first show of the new year. 773-763-9278. This is Choose Views, and we'll be right back.
Welcome back to Choose Views with Richard Chu on WCPT 820 AM, where facts matter. Take it away, Richard.
And take it away I shall. 773-763-9278. Welcome back to Choose Views. Hey, guys, I had to lean into that conversation around, MAGA, y'all own this. And I wanted to connect it and tie it to what we can do and push for in terms of better legislation that leads to better policy on a local level, regional, and national level. And we have to do that. And I want to make sure I'm going to talk about this a little bit more. And I've got a couple of clips that Henry and I put together that I think you guys can appreciate in terms of how our communities have to understand some of the historical perspectives on who really is driving our economy, or who really is driving our workforce, and how we got here, and who's been, who's really been the folks that have made differences. So we're going to talk about that in a little bit with a couple of our clips. But in the meantime, if you missed either of my recent holiday best of broadcasts or want to hear them again or share with friends, both are available on the Choose Views full episodes podcast feed. And yesterday's New Year's episode included bonus content that you did not hear on the station. Listen in to hear my interviews with Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson, Chicago Teacher Union President Stacey Davis Gates, Tom Hartman, immigration attorney Kate Lincoln Goldfinch, DEI expert Dante King, and more. Part 1, we aired on Christmas Day. You'll hear my interviews with Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton, Illinois Attorney General Kwame Raoul, Allison Gill from Muller, She Wrote, and MSW Media, Kurt Mullett, our good friend from Hoosier Blue 63, Michelle Duster, author, and good friend Karen Byrne from True Blue Politics Podcast. The Choose Views full episodes podcasts are available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Amazon, and TuneIn. Subscribe and share today. Today, speaking of, from 2 to 5, Turi Ryder will be in for Joan Esposito, and our guests include Dan Mason, ex-radio manager and current career coach. We'll talk about revisioning your talents and skills in the new year. Dr. Jessica Nuttig-Zitter, author of Extreme Measures and the star of the Oscar-nominated documentary Extremists. So talk about her forthcoming documentary, The Chaplain and the Doctor, which addresses historical shortcomings of healthcare in minority communities. Fred Seo, Senior Policy Counsel at the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights, and Dr. L. David Stewart, Program Director at Territory on the Creating Space Art Installation. Tonight from 5 to 7 p.m., Patty Vasquez is back. Happy New Year, Patty. And her guests include film critic Mike Crowley, Driving It Home with Patty Vasquez. Weeknights on WCPT 820. That's right. Catch it all there, guys. That's where we land. Hope you guys can tune into Joan's show with Tori sitting in, and certainly Patty's show this evening, 5 to 6 p.m., driving you home. So Henry and I were able to put together a couple of clips, and I was talking about before the break, leading up in that last segment, about wealth and distribution and income and compensation. And we know that, and I've never said this and never wanted to give this impression. I want folks to make all the money that they can. Billionaires, millionaires, wealthy, middle, all income levels, to make more and ascend. Vice President talked about not just getting by, but getting ahead. Okay. Not just thriving, but not just surviving, but thriving. So, got nothing against billionaires, but their disproportionate influence on our political systems, which then lead to our economic systems, is out of alignment right now. It just is. Liz Shuler has something to say about it. We've got a clip that Henry and I put together that I'd like you guys to hear.
If you're a billionaire in America, you have a lot to be thankful for. You've enjoyed a system that has worked in your favor for a long time now. You've had years where you pay zero in federal taxes, literally not 1 cent, while the workers at your companies actually pay their fair share. And now you have an incoming administration that wants to hand you more money and power at the expense of the rest of us. We're often told the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Well, giving trillions in tax breaks to the wealthiest people and companies in the history of the world while their fellow Americans struggle to pay for rent and groceries, I believe is the very definition of insanity.
She is the... she's an activist. In case you didn't know, you should look her up. Liz Shuler, Shuler. And, when I say an activist, she's the real deal. And is a president of the AFL-CIO. Check her out. And she's on point with that. That is a definition of insanity. And that's not saying that we can't still, well, let me put it this way, as I said a moment ago. I want everybody to make everything they can. But at the cost or at the pain of others not being able to be part of that doesn't make any sense. It is a definition of insanity. And in our most basic ways in the country, we have to change that. And the change goes back to what I said earlier in the show about finding the thing that you can do, that you can lean into right now in your local community, and then expanding that. And expanding it by having more people get involved and by making sure that we are pushing our leaders locally, regionally, nationally for better legislation. Now's the time, guys. There's no time to sit back and not do anything. Take a I guess you could say a windshield view of what it is that you're frustrated with, and rather than pointing fingers, decide what your take action plan is going to be. I know what mine is, and there's a few of them, but I want you guys to be reminded and inspired by that. There's been a conversation in the last couple of weeks, I guess now. And most heightened in the last probably week or so. That's, Vivek Ramaswamy came out and made a, heartless comment about folks as it relates to, lazy Americans and all that. And found it very ironic that he would say that, given that his whole ability to be here and be successful in this country was built and off of the backs of quote unquote Americans who leaned in and worked hard to provide systems and infrastructure so that he could be born here by what's some people are saying parents that may be anchor babies themselves, or at least there's a conversation that needs to be had around it. In all candor, but this is a dude that says that too many Americans, and he was speaking specifically about white Americans. Because he sure as hell's not going to say that to the face. I have to say that. I have to take a sidebar. People think that Don Lemon got fired because of his comments about women or about a particular woman when it was referencing Nikki Haley running for office. That's not why he got fired. Don Lemon got fired because when Vivek Ramaswamy tried to mansplain to him about black folks in America, Don wasn't having it. And he went after him real time. He stood him down in real time to explain to him that you don't have any purview to talk to me about what it is to be a black man in America. That's why he got fired. But Vivek has said offensive things to the black community and other communities before, and he said it last week, or week before last now. It needs to be noted that in this conversation that he and Musk are having about, DEI and Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, these are programs that have been there to support people that have needed them. And in many ways, these are guys who, in their own ways, are the recipients of the benefits of DEI type of thinking. Inclusion is the word I really should lean into. Types of thinking. Equity. They would not have their wealth were it not for the programs that were fought for during the civil rights movement that allowed for inclusion of all people. They would not be able to do what they're doing. It's a fact. But there's a little bit of a conversation around this, where does DEI fit in? And we've got a clip that Henry and I put together that I want you guys to just kind of hear and check out.
Please don't vote for this. Every couple of months, they find a new phrase to attack. First, it was woke and critical race theory, and now they're on to DEI, and they keep advancing this idea of meritocracy. Meritocracy is this idea that people get rewarded based off of their abilities and their contributions. And it's in contrast to things like nepotism or favoritism. What they're trying to get us to believe, though, is that all of the black and brown or diverse people that work at organizations are somehow there because they were unfairly given these opportunities, when nothing could be further from the truth. What the data shows us is that 70% of jobs are actually never published, and 85% of all jobs found were found through networking, found through relationships. So Elon and similar folks, they don't believe in meritocracy. This is the status quo that they believe in right now. All of this anti-DEI stuff is really just marketing and meant to distract us from the truth. The game is absolutely rigged, and it's not against them. My advice is to invest in your social capital, invest in your relationships. Know that this is the way that the game is being played, and do everything possible to make sure that you have a rich and diverse network so that all the goals that you want to accomplish can be because you know the right people.
So, how do I link that to DEI versus, as he said, the new thing, MEI, meritocracy? Well, we all know that, as he stated, there are many positions at many companies that those jobs were achieved because you knew someone. And so part of the responsibility here is to call out the conversation around let's get rid of DEI and call out the conversation around meritocracy, and really recognize that people aren't always, the best person doesn't always get the job. Many times it's a connection that they have to the people who are hiring for that job. And I'm not making a statement toward, you're going to hire someone that you know. I am making a statement toward those who are hiring with bias. And that's what this clip is trying to illuminate. So let's take a quick break, guys. 773-763-9278. This is Choose Views, and we'll be right back.
You're listening to Choose Views with Richard Chu on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Hey, guys, welcome back to Choose Views, 773-763-9278. Good to be with you. So we have, what's the best way of putting this? The number of people that we have who are kind of coming to being awake, coming to the reality that their vote was not the direction that they really thought it, or not the vote that they really thought they were making. That's going to be talked about a lot, and we're going to see numbers of people that are going to point fingers and say that this is someone else's fault. And ultimately, those who made the decision to vote the way that they did in this election will have to be responsible for that. The question is if they will be. But I think that one of the conversations that is going to have to be had around that, and this is something that the Democratic Party is going to have to take a little bit of responsibility for, not responsibility, but responsibility as it relates to the future, is making sure that our ideas don't get kicked to the side, certainly within the party. How do I want to position this like this? That means that Democratic current elected officials have to do a couple of things at the same time in terms of the balancing act. They have to fight against what the Trump administration is going to try to lay down, whether it be through whether the things that come down are executive orders or are things that the House tries to ram through so that the Senate can vote to get it to 34-time convicted felon's desk. They're going to have to fight on that. They're going to have to fight hard, and they're going to have to make the fight public. So the balancing act is going to be fighting to push against the things that will probably get up for a vote, but making it known this is where we stand. That's one of the things that House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries has got to do. He's got to make it public about the fight. It can't be quiet. It can't be nice. It can't be pretty. It has to be a little bit ugly. Ugly in the sense, not disrespectful, but it has to be, they have to be willing to present the ugliness of what the Republican members of the House of Representatives are going to be trying to ram through. Okay, that's what I mean by they got to be public and a little bit ugly about it. And at the same time, what they're going to have to do is then be pushing toward what our legislative ideas are. That's why I say our ideas can't be sort of pushed aside. The Democratic leadership on all levels have to be responsible for that and have to be vocal about that and have to be public about that and have to be somewhat nasty about it and say, this is what the Republicans are trying to do. Here's how it's going to negatively impact you. They want to Liz Shuler's comment in that clip. They want to continue to give more money to billionaires. No, we're not. We're going to stand as best we can in the way of that happening. Okay? How is that going to happen? It's going to come from tax policy. How they want to restructure tax policy. 1. 2, it's going to also happen because of the way in which they go about providing contracts to wealthy and uber wealthy businesses and business owners. Democrats are going to have to be willing to stand strong, and when I say stand strong, they have to talk about what they're trying to get passed and how insane that is and how it's going to be negative for the country. And at the same time, this is the balancing act. They're going to have to talk about what is a better way forward, because that's what the country, I believe, is going to be in need of, is highlighting the Republicans' craziness and carnage and chaos. At the same time, here's what's better. Here's what we're trying to do that we believe will be better for the country. I believe that if they take some part of that approach or a version of that approach, that there will be people who will understand that our ideas are better and they make more sense. If they don't do that and they sit back and take the hits and then have to respond on their heels rather than, as I said last week, being in the ready position, then they're going to always be caught flat-footed. And that's the one thing that the Democratic leadership has got to do. And I'll say that as well for Mayor Johnson here in Chicago, or for local mayors wherever you might be listening, or for governors in blue states, or governors, period, that are progressive in their thinking. They've got to be proactive, out there in front, taking the lead, taking the conversation, making whatever's left of mainstream media talk about them first. And that to me is an approach that the Democratic Party on all levels hasn't done enough of. It hasn't given the voters and their supporters the reason to vote for them all the time. And it has to be an all the times message. That's why I said week before last, every Friday, the Democratic leadership needs to have, a flank of people at the mic every Friday. Rotate in 2, 3, 5 people every Friday before we go home for the weekends. This is what the Republicans are doing. That's garbage legislation that we can't allow to become policy. And here's what we're going to do to offset that. Here's how we're pushing back. And here's what we're doing to make it better, because this is what we think is a better way forward. They have got to come out of the gate doing that. They just have to, guys. And so if you're going to make phone calls to your legislators that are local, that are national, that are regional, and everything in and around that, the conversation, the phone calls, the emails need to be ones that say, hey, Democrats, look, we have huge opportunities here because we know that that they're going to stumble and bumble and fall. So let's be proactive. So when you reach out, let those leaders know, here's what I want you to be talking about. Here's what I want to hear you guys collectively saying to us. That will be one of the most important tools in not making sure that our ideas don't die and get pushed to the side. Is making sure that our leaders know that that's what we require of them. And as we navigate through these 4 years, that to me is going to be, that's one of our superpowers. Okay. Excuse me. And along with that, again, as I said, the balancing act that I know is going to have to be there. Talk about the negativity of the Republican Party, highlight it. Here's what these crazy fools are doing. Meanwhile, here's what we're doing to move things forward. I think it's a recipe for success, or certainly it's one of the dishes to talk about food in this holiday season of consumption of food. It's one of the things that should be on the platter. Is a weekly, minimally a weekly dose, almost, sort of the Democratic House and Senate versions of, their own little fireside chats. If I were giving advice to, and I guess I do this show kind of indirectly, am doing that. If I were giving advice to the Democratic leadership, I would tell them on a weekly basis, you have to do that. You have no choice. You have to out them every single Friday. People take that home for the weekends and then take the upside of what when we come back on Monday, this is what we're going to be working on. And over the weekend as legislators, this is what we're going to be working on. People want to hear that. They want to know that all the money's not going to, as Liz Schuler said, to the billionaires. They want to know that their hard work, that it's not just about their hard work, but when the hard work is put in, that it's going to be recognized as an everyday employee or worker in the community. I just believe that's just a big opportunity, and hopefully the Democrats are hearing this and have been thinking about it on their own. Who's made what happened in this country? It's always interesting when someone who is of a particular group speaks out about things that they think don't get recognized enough. And when we come back from the break, there's a clip that I want to play about how our communities have, really kind of grown and how our communities have really fostered a better way, and who's been at the front of the line of making that happen for decades. And I don't know, maybe we can get this. Let's see if we can get that clip in now, the Asian American on model minority. Let's play that one before we go to the break.
If you're Desi and you have conservative beliefs when it comes to racial issues, you have been fooled by the model minority myth. Let me break that down for you. In 1965, the United States government put into place a new immigration act that only allowed Asian immigrants in that had very high education levels or special skills. And because of this, we were predetermined to be successful. And when we were, the media painted us as model minorities, as good, law-abiding citizens that were the opposite of black people. But remember, black Americans were not introduced to the society on the basis of education. They were brought in as slaves, as property. And then they were lynched, and then they were segregated against and forced into ghettos and not given jobs, and they were mass incarcerated against, and then they were criminalized for petty drug crimes, and so much more. And these issues generationally affect their communities because it's part of the system. So yes, South Asians face ignorance, casual racism, hate crimes, but we have never in American history been systematically dehumanized and oppressed in the way that black people have. You gotta understand that white America intentionally gave us partial access to socioeconomic white privilege so they could say, oh look, the Asians did it, so anybody can do it too, and therefore deny the existence of structural racism against black people. It's a lie. This country used us as a tool to divide people of color and perpetuate white supremacy. Wake up!
So if you have a question or a thought around DEI, MEI, immigration, the southern border, this gentleman puts it plain, that it's been baked into the system. And that's ultimately, and this is coming from, I love finding these kinds of clips and posts, because this is coming from people of communities that are speaking about what their experience is. And this is coming from a Southeast Asian gentleman that says, hey, wait a minute, we know what's in the sauce. And we know that people voted for a thing that was based on their fear. And, like I said earlier, now those folks have got to own that. Because ultimately, let's just look at the pivot, not even the pivot. Look at the curtain that came up with what Musk said and what Ramaswamy said. Now, all of a sudden, and then, of course, 34-time convicted felon says, now we need to have more people immigrating to the country. So the hypocrisy that we warned you about and the lies, frankly, that we warned you about, it didn't even take a month, and they're already out there. So what this gentleman says, it was already baked in the sauce. Too many people just didn't want to pay attention to it. So there you go. All right, guys, I see your calls. You're going to grab your calls when we come back. 773-763-9278. This is Choose Views, and we'll be right back.
Good morning. You're waking up with Richard Chew.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning.
We're live and ready to hear from you. Text or call us now at 773-763-9278. Same number. Simple as that. Let's get the conversation going on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Hey, guys, welcome back to Choose Views, 773-763-9278. Yeah, I had to lean into this conversation because I saw that so many people have been, the complaints of the bait and switch with regard to this 34-time convicted felon and his cronies. But our responsibility is to call it out. And I know that some people are concerned that the Democratic leadership may not do that, which is why I'm saying that if you're going to be making calls and sending letters and sending emails and communications to the respected elected officials, you've got to call it out. And that's a local conversation as much as it is a national conversation. And we will continue to encourage and inspire you guys to be of the mindset to do that, because with that, that's where we're going to be able to make some of those changes that we so desperately need to continue on that path that Biden and Harris were on, but also as a way to stand in the way of the craziness that's going to come from the right. And the reason I keep saying, even on a local level, is because I know, as I said earlier in the show, that there are people who are right here in the good old city of Chicago that voted red because their belief system says that the Republican Party is the party that should be running the country, running the local communities, running the local mayor's offices and counties and legislatures. And they're wrong because they get it wrong each time. They create this, Tom Hartman calls it the two Santa Clauses. So even on a local level, we have to push back. And I think that's going to be the overarching message, guys. And it's going to be the message that has to be said repeatedly, because it'll be easy to slip away from that. And then that's when our ideas do die. That's when we get comfortable going, well, it's not that bad. No, the fact that you would say, use the word bad in and of itself means that it shouldn't be tolerable. I try to always put things as best I can in the positive light, even when I'm bringing the sledgehammer to the conversation. Because it's about tearing down the things that haven't been successful and good for all of us, so that we can build up things that are going to be good for all of us. And so that's why sometimes will hear me say, you got to bring a sledgehammer to the party. Not literally, but bring a sledgehammer of thoughts and ideas so that ours don't die. We get to tear down theirs and build ours up. Clearing the deck, cleaning the slate so that we can build ours up. So I will be repeatedly talking about our ideas and how we have to be willing to pull our shoulders back and say we are not going to tolerate this, because the minute that we start to say, well, it's not that bad, is the minute that it becomes really bad. And y'all know what I'm talking about. All right, so let's get with a couple of our callers that have been on hold, and I appreciate you waiting. Let's go to Andrew in Detroit. Andrew, good morning and welcome to Choose Views.
Hey, Richard, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. What's going on?
I've got 3 points, so I'll try to be quick. I generally am. First point is your show is too important to only be 2 hours long. It needs to be at least 3 hours long, if not 4 hours long. And I'm not even kidding, because the things you get across the air are things we're not hearing everywhere else. My second point is I agree with your thought that we should be more involved, and we've got to get our representatives to be more involved with us. Those are the people we elected to speak to us directly. So, with you asking them to tell us where are they going to do this? Where are we going to hear them? Where are we going to see them? Because I'd like to see the Democrats, I guess every Tuesday morning, they give some kind of address about what's going on. I don't know where to watch that, where to hear that. Mm-hmm. And even Corinne Jean-Pierre, when she, and Jen Psaki, I didn't know when they were on, where they were on, how I could see them and hear them.
So check this. Point, go ahead. Sorry, I missed if you had three points. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Andrew. Go ahead.
And you're fine. The third point is, I'm thinking like a Friday show. You misdirected me there for a minute. I'm old.
That's all right, my man.
Maybe on a Friday show, maybe weekly, have your callers call in and ask them, who did you call? Who represented you? Did you call, and what did you ask them?
Okay. Listen,
so
man.
that we find out. We find out what our community, what us listeners are thinking, what they're saying too.
You know what, Andrew? I'm a man of open-mindedness, and let's see how we can make things. I've been saying all year and last year to do whatever I can to make the show better for you guys. I just made a note of that, and we're going to figure out a way to build that into Friday's broadcast. Henry's nodding profusely, like, absolutely, we can do that. So, Andrew, that's a great idea. Hadn't even thought about it, but trust me, my man, we're going to figure that one out. I promise you that. Now, let me circle back.
Fight to get 4 hours.
Andrew,
I'm not even kidding.
I know you're not, and you're wonderful for saying that. Let me circle back to your number 2 point about where the Dems are going to bring that message to and how we're going to get it. I'm right on with you on that. And listen, I don't know the specific, singular, correct answer, but here's what I'm going to put out there. What I would hope that they would be doing. And when you ask that question, this is what popped into my brain is, well, they got everybody's information in terms of donors who sent them money. Henry's like, yep, they got our information. They know where we are. So maybe spend some of that money, that time, that interest, that resource in just reaching out to people who've contributed money. If they've got their phone number or their email, maybe. And I listen, Andrew, I'm thinking on my feet and saying this. This is coming from the hip. If they have a way of reaching out to us via email, then send us an email every week of what they're working on and what they're working on, what they're doing. At least email it to people if they can't put it into a broadcast. And if they know that people are on social media, if they know that people are on, the X's and the Blue Skies and the Threads and all the rest, and on YouTube, then every week, be posting every week. Reach out and say, "Hey, Andrew. Hey, Richard. Hey, Henry. Let us know." I mean, and again, I'm openly, honestly saying I'm shooting from the hip on this right now, but I'm going to bake that out a little bit because it makes total sense what you said. They got to get that message to us and let us know what they're talking about and let us know when they're talking about it. So. I appreciate.
I'm going to today contact my congressman and ask him to do that. And I know he will. Shri Ganadar, he's a wonderful person. I know he'll take that up. I hope the rest of your listeners will do the same. Contact that congressman and tell them, we want to know from you what you're doing on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
Thanks, Richard.
Thanks, Andrew, for the call, and Happy New Year to you. We love that you call in and appreciate your contribution, man.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Andrew's not old. He's just well-seasoned. That's what we got to say, Andrew. You're well-seasoned. All right, let's grab another quick call. Let's go to Al in Franklin Park.
Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Al. Welcome to the show. Sorry.
That's okay. My comment has to do with messaging and even the Friday newsletter, which is what the Republican counterparts here in Illinois are already doing. And it is full of gaslighting and projection all the time, getting their point out. And one example is that I got a few days ago is they're asking me if President Trump should sue Governor Pritzker because Governor Pritzker came out and called him a rapist, and that's not true. And it's just amazing that we get this stuff, that I get this stuff every week, and they're even more emboldened. And they have we talk about the liberal bubble, but there's a much bigger conservative bubble that is well funded, and people stay within that bubble. And somehow we got to get into that bubble. And I'm looking at this new head, Kathy Salvi of the Illinois Republican Party, that puts this out every week, and I'm wondering, does she believe this stuff? Where are they? Are they all, or are they all just grifters? And because it's all like pro-Trump and how great it is that we won, and all the lines we hear from these guys, and how one I got was how all the politicians in Illinois are corrupt right now, and so on and so forth. And
no, Al, listen. I mean, there's two things that I'm taking from what you're saying. First of all, thank you for the contribution. But one of the things is, we as Democrats, we need to hold ourselves to the fire a little bit tighter and make sure we're strengthening and becoming stronger and better for the people that have voted for us collectively. And I say us as a team, not me as a politician. I'm not. But we need to hold ourselves a little bit tighter to the fire and say, okay, let's make our brand better. I'm totally down with that, in agreement with that. There's everything right about doing that. Now, on the flip side, I'm with you, because excuse me, I ask myself this question oftentimes, Al. Are these people just that doggone stupid, or are they really believers in some of the garbage that comes out of their mouths? And so, or the third piece, Al, might be, or are they so far in the tank with who's moneyed them up, who's putting money behind them, that they have no other choice but to say this garbage? Do you know what I mean? Like,
I do.
Does that make any sense, how I'm putting that out there?
It does, and it's just so broad, because it's representatives in Illinois, it's the people on 560 AM, it's national pundits on Fox News, it's the people coming from Salem Radio and coming from how do they? I'm talking about those people in charge that are all giving us the lies and the gaslighting. What do they believe? Or are they just all grifters?
Well, and that is part of the question now, and I definitely take it to heart. So, Happy New Year, my friend. I'm glad you're doing well. Stay healthy, and you got a space to land here to call in and add to the show. So we appreciate your contribution.
Thank you, Richard. Have a great New Year too.
I will. Talk to you soon. Bye now. Al's a good guy. He's always in the mix and always making good contribution. He's a thinking kind of dude. A couple times when I met him, I could just see his brain kind of on fire, Henry. All right, guys, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back. We're going to grab the rest of your calls as we wrap up today's first of the New Year's show. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Choose Views with Richard Chu on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Hey, guys, welcome back to Choose Views, 773-763-9278. Great idea from Andrew, and Henry and I were already brainstorming on how we can make that into a thing. So we'll keep you guys posted as we come up with something. Henry, let's grab a couple quick last calls. Is it Edie or Eddie? Eddie. Hey, good morning, Eddie. Welcome to the show. Welcome to Choose Views. And Happy New Year.
Hi. Happy New Year, man. Hey, so I kind of wanted to talk about a couple different things. Earlier I was going to piggyback right on the conversation about the violence and, the stuff inherited within the system towards minorities. However, your last couple speakers inspired me about a whole different subject that I think irks all of us. Something that's on my mind is those provocateurs like Charlie Kirk or Ben Shapiro, how they constantly come out and bug everybody. And I'm talking about like the stuff that they go around doing. Like they show up to the DNC, they show up to all these places where they know we're rallying just to pick fights with people about things they don't know about. I mean, this is the same guy who says college is a scam. And if you ask him, like, oh, somebody shot me, who's going to do the work on me now? My guy doesn't have a degree. Like, that guy, there's stuff wrong. There's stuff wrong with those people. And, they go around gaslighting everybody for their views. And to me, why don't we have something like that? Like, why don't, not necessarily provocateurs, but like just people who go out and kind of just fact check them on the spot?
Yeah. Well, have you seen, Eddie, and thank you for your contribution about that. Have you seen the couple times where Charlie Kirk has gone up against a smarter college student? And then
his immediate response is like, oh, what is a woman? Yeah, I've seen that quite a few times. Did you know he did that at the DNC too?
Yeah, no. Listen, let me just share this with you, Eddie, and all due respect, and I'm assuming you're kind of in the Chicago metropolitan area, but I got to tell you this. I came up on probably 3 or 4, probably 5 or 6 of the Fox-esque, MAGA-esque people during the convention and when I was there. And I had to remember the promise that I made to my wife and my family is that my most important job every day is to get my butt home safely. So what I mean by that, Eddie, is I had to pull myself back. You know where I'm going. That's why I prefaced this with saying you're a Chicago-esque guy. I had to pull myself back from getting after a couple people who were there kind of saying some stupid stuff. I just told myself, Richard, leave it alone. I'm
actually surprised that he walked out of there because, they got it on
safely
film now. Yeah, safely, because I don't know what the hell compelled Charlie Kirk to say this. He's on camera now for saying it, but he went up to a little black boy and said the civil rights movement was a mistake.
Yeah.
And
I know.
What do you mean by that? And that was kind of an earlier statement I was going to make. I was raised through the projects growing up here. My grandparents are black. And, there's some things that they taught me about nurturing versus caring, where it's like the notion of if everything has to be handed to me because of what's happened in the past, then I'll never know my fruits of labor.
Yeah.
And it only applies to a certain extent. I do firmly believe that there's something in the system going on in place now where it's like, okay, we go to Batavia, Illinois, we go to like rich parts of Aurora, Naperville. It's obviously predominantly one color, and the city itself, the city should be our proof that like there's obviously something in the system, because why is it only the areas with the minorities that seem to be affected adversely and everybody's struggling to get by? And you're telling me that, like, through generations of wealth inherited within the system and the violence and the positions of powers that be, you're telling me that it's our fault somehow that everything's happening to us, but nothing was changed within the system to help us more. And when there's people gaslighting, saying that we don't work hard enough for what we want, this and that. And that's where people like Charlie Kirk come out, where, he's raised by people that obviously believe in the other side of what I'm talking about. And, they've never had to experience that struggle or see it for themselves, where they're like, oh, I woke up where the sun was warm in Naperville, had my Dunkin' Donuts. I don't mean to take a swipe at my fellow Illinoisans. I really don't. But you wake up on the bright side of Naperville. You got your little mom and pop coffee shop. Everybody's holding hands down the Sunset, and then there's us. It's like you heard the door slam. Everybody's ducking for cover.
Yeah. Listen, Eddie. First of all, man, thank you for your contribution. And as I say to folks, you have a place to land here to talk about the things that are concerning you, because your contribution helps us all think a little bit differently about certain topics. So I appreciate that. And listen, man, Happy New Year. We're gonna get through this. Our communities collectively have had to do that, and this is nothing, quote, new. It's just a little bit different in how it's skewed. So we just have to arm ourselves a little bit differently and be ready for this fight and push back and do what you just did, which is to be unapologetic about pointing out that we know that there's inherent bias in our systems. And when we acknowledge that, then we can start to deal with it and work toward making it better. I'm a firm believer in that. So, my man, it's good to hear your voice.
We should get like a Dave Chappelle type of team to go out and mess with the Reds.
Folks couldn't handle Dave Chappelle as a politician. Can you imagine that? He'd be a constant bleep session. All right, Eddie. Thank you, man. I'm glad I made you laugh, and blessings to you in this new year. And like I said, you got a place to land here, so be safe, okay?
Thanks, man.
All right, man. All right, let's see. Can we go to George real quickly? Let's go to George. Hey, George, welcome to Choose Views. Good morning.
Yeah, how's it going, Richard? I met you the night that Tom was having his book signing over
at Filbert Rose. Oh yeah. Good to hear your voice again, man. Glad. How you doing? Happy New Year.
Same to you, bub. I got one question.
Yes.
I keep getting texts on my phone. They want donations so that Biden can get these 4 judges set up in the Supreme Court. Is there any truth to this? Is it going to be done before Trump comes in?
I want to make sure I understand your question before I respond. Are you asking if President Biden can get Supreme Court justices in before the new administration comes in?
Yes.
During this, what's considered the lame duck window or period of time between an election and the actual inauguration, I'm not sure how much can actually be done. And to be honest with you, if that were going to be the case, it would have been something that the Democratic Party should have been legislating for. And if there's a ball that's been dropped, if you want to call it that, the day after President Biden was inaugurated in 2021, they should have been leaning into that then in terms of expanding the Supreme Court. So my answer is going to be more in terms of what I wish they had done and I was advocating for, as millions of folks who were also advocating for. He should have dropped the hammer at that point and said, I'm forcing this through. You all can kiss my behind. This is what I'm going to do. That's I'm not being disrespectful in saying that, but that's what I would have wanted to see him do from jump. You all can kiss the sun shining part of where the sun doesn't shine part of my body. I'm doing this because I know what you all are going to try to do. That didn't happen. And in this short window of this lame duck-esque period of time, I doubt that it will happen. What I think he needs to, well, I shouldn't say what I think he needs to do. I have to be careful. What I know he's working on by the evidence that I'm seeing is getting other federal judges squared away. And so right now, that's going to kind of be the firewall in some ways with regard to judges nationally. And so that's where I sit in that conversation. That's why I wanted to make sure I understood your question. I honestly, and I'm just being realistic, I don't see anything happening with the Supreme Court between now and January 20th. What I do see is after the inauguration, that this is where the Democratic Party has got to say, who are we putting up for our next national run? What are we going to do in the midterms so that we can continue to hold the line when it comes to federal judges? Respectfully, it's a long-winded answer, but I had to include in what I wished had happened, in 2021. So that's how I see it, George. How's your New Year going so far, man?
I got a little touch of the flu, but I'll live through it.
Yes, we all do. We all do it. As I've talked to some of my friends and colleagues that they may have had a little scratchy throat and sneezy and snotty face and all that, those home remedies do work. So get yourself some hot tea, some honey, some ginger, and a little cayenne, and heat that up and sip that slowly, and that should help as well.
Okay, thank you.
All right, George. Thank you.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, George, and thanks for the contribution. Dr. Chu just arrived and prescribing a home remedy. But no, listen, at this point, I don't see that there's going to be any changes in the Supreme Court at this point that should have happened, 3.5 years ago. Just being honest with you guys, and also, a dose of reality in that space. But when we see that and we think about how we go forward and what we do, let's support what the elected officials are going to be able to do as it relates to legislation and to policy, and make sure that they're standing in the void to block the craziness and highlight what the Dems are doing on all levels. Mayor Johnson's administration's got to do the same thing. Let the folks know what you're working on, so that people can have something to buy into and to vote for and to support, and understand this is why I'm supporting the candidates or the elected officials that I support. I just believe it's a recipe for success. All right, guys, thanks for being with us on this first live show of 2025. See, I didn't say 2024. I got it right. And most always, guys, take a deep breath and make your life count. We'll see you tomorrow.